This is an invitation, something we've all received many times. But what's inside each and every one of those? Oh, that anticipation of what's to come, that sense that you're a part of something, that feeling that you're included. This, my friends, is an invitation addressed to all of you. An invitation to pull up a chair, take a seat, and to join me today at the table. So make yourself comfortable. Let's close our eyes together. Think of a memorable food experience you had, one that made you feel happy. Was it the food? Was it the place? Or was it the people that you were there? Was there a table? You can open your eyes. Thank you. You've just helped me set the table. And now, I'd like to serve up a delicious plate of food for thought. Using the ingredients of happy food experiences, the routine of everyday life, and one life-altering experience. This is a dish that's on the menu today, and I call it setting the table for happiness. Now, this dish uses a particular ingredient. It's rare, and it's a predominantly European variety. It pairs nicely with strong flavors. It's bold, yet versatile. It's also widely available on the internet. It's me. My name is Xenopoulos Peccini, and I would like to introduce myself to you today. This is my identity. My name is everything. 3 distinct names, 3 different cultures. The first given, the second assumed, the third inherited. I got my first name from my paternal great-grandfather, Amilcare, who changed it to Thomas to appear less ethnic and more American after he had immigrated to the United States more than a century ago. I got my middle name from my Cypriot wife, who paternal grandmother assumed this name for her brood of 5 children because she really liked the name of this Greek author. So because I too really liked my wife, I assumed this name upon marriage. And I got my last name from my Italian heritage, a family of travelers and explorers from the region of Tuscany. It's with this last name that I identify the most. It's the name that I've passed down to my 4 boys, who will carry this name into a time I will not see. Yet, I'm from all of these cultures and from none of them because I'm permanently living in the diaspora of 2 out of these 3 cultures. And although I speak the language of these 3 cultures, my greatest fluency is in their food. Talk to me for 5 minutes, and somehow I'm going to get food into the conversation. Get to know me, and it's all food all the time. I like to think of myself as a cultural traveler, and food is my transportation. Food brought forth through cooking and eating signifies a journey of coming together, the destination of which is always one place, the table. It's my happy place, the one place I feel at home wherever I find myself. And though eating habits are totally different in Italy, Cyprus, and the United States, one commonality that each of these share is what I like to call a comfort food experience. Big groups eating big meals. Where? At big tables. See, history and Western civilization show us the importance of the table to food and to feasting, but today, how many of us actually sit down to eat regularly at the table? Think about this for a moment. We spend hours out of our day related to pursuits of personal pleasure outside of work, yet complain that we can't find the time to sit down and have a meal together. Today, I'm not here to encourage you to cook more at home and eat out less. Today, I'm here to talk about the table. Not the side table, not the coffee table, but the table you eat on at home. I would like for you to reconsider what you think that table is for and about what happens in that space. That happy food experience you thought about earlier wasn't just about the food, was it? You see, these memories have greater meaning within the context of the food environment. Setting the table isn't just about putting down plates and utensils. When we pull up a chair and take a seat, we're actually setting the table to create experiences like birthdays or holidays. I could never forget sitting at the table and being served my mom's lasagna every childhood birthday. That special once in a year event is, in fact, what most of us do. But if we're setting the table to create experiences a couple times a year, why are we missing out on the Mondays to Fridays? If that table hadn't been set on any given day, I would have missed out on listening to my grandparents' stories of their experiences in the Great Depression, hearing my gentle grandfather speak to me in Italian, discussing the minutiae of my Zia Mariangela's tiramisu, or feeling that togetherness when we all huddle around the table on a cool winter's night to enjoy my mother-in-law's soup au lemon. All these memories were created not only by the food, they became experiences because they were centered around the table. And not just on special occasions, but every day. My happy food experience that I'd like to share with you today is about the everyday. I had set the table for breakfast on my oldest son's first day of school on the 11th of September, 2006. At the time, we were living in a 40 square meter apartment, and we had converted the sunroom into the dining room to accommodate the very first piece of furniture my wife and I had bought years earlier before we were even married. It was an especially big table that was totally inappropriate for our needs at the time in our life when we had bought it. But we grew into that table, both as a couple and then later as we grew our family. So I did something, for that morning, something felt different. It probably had something to do with the fact that I was going to have to let my son go that day, which is probably the first experience that a parent and child experience together, but separately. That would explain why it was important for me to provide something warm and comforting as a way to counteract the altogether uncertainty that was coming up that day. I wanted to provide something that would counteract the uncertainty of an altogether new experience for all of us. So I did something I had done 1,000 times before. I just never had to do on the night before the first day of school. I set the table. I remember a colorful striped tablecloth, cloth napkins, my grandmother's blue willow plates that you see here, and the full complement of utensils, cups and saucers, glasses, one each for juice and water. So there we were on that warm September morning, my wife and I and our two oldest boys taking up just one side of that big table to eat a hot breakfast of chocolate chip pancakes and freshly squeezed orange juice. When we brought him to school that day, my courageous little boy still cried his eyes out. But that day was more about it becoming a habit of connection. Ever since, we sit down the night before. We'd sit down every morning for breakfast, table set from the night before, to a breakfast of something that is easy, quick. I know this may be a small daily miracle, but we have the benefit of starting our day together as a family, all for a little preparation of no more than 10 minutes, which is definitely less time than we all devote to our daily screen time. On the first and last day of the school year, we do something a little different. Our children get sent off with a warm breakfast of chocolate chip pancakes and freshly squeezed orange juice. We're now in our 13th school year as parents. That's a lot of pancakes. But there are definitely more memories than chocolate chips. That first grader, he wasn't at the table this year. He'd begun his compulsory military service back in July. He was scheduled to get out on leave the next day. I saved him a pancake. This year I posted a picture of the scene of one of our morning breakfasts on Instagram. A friend commented, "I'm in awe that you do this every day." It's simple, like a routine, like brushing your teeth or exercising. This has become a daily ritual in our family, so we're plugged into each other, not just once over breakfast, but at our big meal later on in the day. And I call it this because it's neither lunch nor supper. We set the table not based on a set mealtime, but for how it corresponds to our daily schedules. Tuesdays are not like Thursdays. So with this flexibility with our meal times, it means that we're able to sometimes eat at 3 or 4 or 6, or sometimes even at 9, which I know seems horrifying to some. But let's be honest here. Faced with this choice, do we feed our bodies or do we nourish our souls? I found that being less focused on set meal times, because that's what society says we have to do, allows us to focus more on setting the table for a connection over food whenever I can carve out that time after school and work. We all have to eat. It's not so much how, or it's not so much when, but how we do it that really matters. You're setting the table for creating a sphere of things to just happen. That's the food for your soul. Setting the table on a regular basis allowed me to stand up and see what was happening from above, to observe the culture that exists between individuals in what is a relatively intimate space, whether it was for my family every day, hosting my friends for supper, or eventually getting involved in what would become a life-altering experience. I had actually been setting the table over the years for this project, and I didn't even know I was doing it. A social experiment involving food. 8 years after I had set that table for a habit of connection for my son's first day of school in 2006, I set a new table for a new kind of connection on the 31st of March, 2014. That was the day that I became the host of a supper club. My wife and I had actually no plan. This wasn't supposed to be anything. But we had discussed a few principal guidelines. It would be an inclusive experience, which means anyone who wanted to come could get a seat. Friends or couples could come together, but they would be seated at separate tables. And 2 or more tables of no more than 6 to 8 people, blind tables. No consideration of age or gender. The individual was the focus. Guests were asked to fill out a questionnaire, more for them to get an idea of what they were bringing to the table. That was it. And more than a few days of preparation on my part. I played host when the guests arrived, serving cocktails, my wife and I cooking throughout, and then presenting each of the 3 courses in the dining room. The rest was up to each guest to connect with the whole group during cocktail hour, and then later on during the smaller group at his or her table. After guests left in the wee hours of the morning, I closed the door and I turned around and I saw the dining room. And I realized, simply by setting the table, this created a happy food experience for 12 people who had unexpectedly pulled up a chair to a unique food experiment. And there began a project as unexpected as it was amazing that has given me the privilege of setting the table for our 88th supper next Saturday night, having served nearly 1,400 guests over 5 seasons. I realized much later I wasn't setting the table for strangers, but for friends who had yet to meet. That was the fun part. The challenging part was personal. When you open up your home to others, you put yourself, everything, out on the line, exposing your foibles and vulnerabilities in the most private of places, your home. The greatest obstacle for me was not the fear of failure, it was rejection. You would think that someone who hosts a supper club would be immune to that sort of thing, yet every time an invitation is sent, there's that school-age boy who still wonders if anyone is going to show up to his birthday party. When you spend the last 56 months of your life facing your greatest fears, something happens. By repeatedly opening yourself up to rejection, you repeatedly expose yourself to your own authenticity, to acceptance, and to connection. For those who accept your invitation, you end up setting the table for those who are open to what you have to offer them. You become drawn to those who are open to acceptance and spend less energy focused on those who cannot. The potential for connection is just an invitation away. All you have to do is set the table. What the success of the social experiment tells us is that by setting the table and creating the space where people want to stay for a really long time, people aren't in search of good food, but for the experience of connecting authentically to others, why they too want to be invited to that birthday party. Some outgoing, others reserved, who all hunger to feel for a magical few hours, the mutual acceptance and fellowship that exists in that beautiful space when you sense that you're a part of something, that feeling that you're included. So what's the takeaway? You're invited to take the time to set the table this coming week. Happiness is setting the table every day for experience and for fostering authentic connections. It's a basic idea, so simple in its execution, a universal concept that spans time, distance, and cultures. So just once this week, twice the next, 12 times next month, I invite you to make a routine of creating that wonderful space for yourself, your loved ones, and for those friends you have yet to meet, to make a habit of setting the table for happiness. You're invited. Do you accept?